messages I haven't gotten to. Good afternoon, LinkedIn. Happy Thursday. Welcome to another episode of Let's Build Your Audience in HubSpot with Joshua Oakes. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I am doing great. Doing great. Uh, I love talking about custom objects. So, um, excited for this conversation to continue the journey of building self-service and supporting our buyers more effectively, which uh, surprise, it supports our internal teams more effectively when we can do that. So let's dig in, man.
Yeah, it's great uh, when your business processes, when the needs of your internal teams are aligned with your customers' needs, so that you can serve them more effectively. I guess I love talking about custom objects, it, particularly given how frequently I end up discussing them. I was in a number of extended meetings and conversations with folks yesterday where I discussed custom objects in detail, but what I really love is talking about how we can use tools to enable our sales and marketing team to serve customers. And that is just, as see all of our previous shows, uh, even the best CRM in the world, what you get when you take it out of the box is not modeled after how your business works and who your customers are. So there's things that you want to do to look for these opportunities to improve the tools and your utilization of those tools to serve your specific needs. Um, so
Yeah,
I am excited to
an
talk about
important
that.
distinction for sure.
Yeah.
It's easy to get excited about the tool set for sure, which makes me think we should revisit maybe on all these custom object uh, focused episodes, like um, when, when is the trigger for I need something custom?
We're going to talk about some of that today, as a matter of fact. So, uh,
Awesome.
uh, excellent tease for something that you didn't know was coming up in the agenda. Well done.
All
Um,
right.
the What we're talking about today is particularly uh, how we serve prospects or buyers in our kind of self-directed buyer world, where 80% of decision and research and consideration happens before a buyer raises their hand, that's kind of a rule of thumb for how things work now. And how, if you want to thrive in an environment where that is the case and the buyers have all the power and want more information, and then you need to juggle your sales and marketing, your go to market strategy to support that. And so instead of doing all of your like fit assessment, scoring things after you have entered a sales conversation with them, you equip buyers to do it themselves with enough information, context, etc., whatever is needed to do it before they raise their hands. So we're talking about how you can um, as you model, as you expand your, you know, some people might call this go to market, some people call it top of funnel, some people call it awareness generation, whatever, you could call it demand gen. Um, but as you introduce some of those, like, or looking for ways to introduce content and experiences that get you in front of prospects and help them along that journey. How we use custom objects to, as we said, meet both the needs of the business and to serve the customer. So we're talking about it. Let me pull up a diagram we've looked at a couple of times here. Um, but we are talking about um, a whoops, there ago. Um, we were talking about these interactions that happen that are kind of more complex, in-depth, contextual interactions that happen that we can use to deliver value for our prospects. So that's things like, as we previously talked about, application interactions, or things like, quizzes, like which movie character are you, or knowledge quizzes, readiness assessments, general surveys, which product is right for me, configurators, how do I know which computer, which car, which whatever, a lot of things. Calculating like what your utilization or pricing model might be, or like self-assessments for fitness for your solution. Those kinds of things that, um, when we put them further up in the buyer's, um, I don't want to say journey because that's a little bit of a loaded word, but we can help um, folks pre-qualify or disqualify for themselves, or for our solution, or help them figure out things that are stopping them from moving forward, from figuring out if they're even in the right space, for doing that top of funnel education in a much more contextual way, like instead, do a 5-minute interactive instead of somehow finding our 5 articles and skimming them because they're too long, and trying to learn like what your story is, delivering that. You can do that without HubSpot custom objects. You can do that lots of ways. But the key here is that um, if you want to carve out some position in their mind, if you want to be recognized as an expert in that field or context, if you want to be able to support the journey of your prospects, if you want to be able to understand what you're seeing out there from the people who come and interact with you, then you're going to want to um, capture some information and provide some value. Uh, Ideally, in the one system where everybody works, which is, as we're talking about today, is HubSpot, um, and uh, and that, instead of all of these things, being always gated behind, now give us your email and we'll tell you, the results of your quiz or whatever, and you get, a lot of abandonment there because people are like, oh, now you're gonna send me a bunch of email, try to get me to book a meeting, um, and so on. If we capture those things on a custom object record, we have all kinds of downstream value that we can give to the prospect, and information that we can collect to do our jobs better. So we're talking specifically about some of those, not, we're talking specifically not about an application. We covered that separately, but if we have an interaction where a calculator or a configuration, a self-assessment, survey, or a fun, dare I say, marketing interaction that's like, which superhero are you, or what's your superpower, what's your marketing superpower, what's your, whatever, any kind of superpower in any domain, then we should collect that information because it's beneficial to everybody involved. So
And
the go ahead.
if I could just take a step back, I think you mentioned something interesting that may relate, may not. But you mentioned that journey is kind of a loaded word. Why is it a loaded word?
Uh, it's a loaded word uh, because uh, I I don't believe in customer journeys. A lot of companies set out, when they are trying to solve a sales and marketing problem, they set out to create a customer journey, and you know that's well intended, but typically, I mean, misguided, I think, right? Like, we can't dictate or control those things. My analogy that I often use here is like, customer journey is like bowling, right? You're going to roll the ball, it's going to go down the alley, and and it's either going to hit some pins, knock them over, or not. We treat them like this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. And if we can get a little bit fancy, then we say like, maybe one or two variations on some of those stages. But most customer journeys that um, uh, I end up seeing, I often come into an engagement with a client and they're like, oh, we're working on a customer journey. Here it is. Can you help us like figure out how to apply this? And what they actually hand me is like basically their sales process, not a customer journey, right? And it's because aside from the last couple of steps, the like possible uh, step that happened before branches out into an infinite level of possibility. And so, customer journeys end up being like just restatements of a sales process, or so detailed and restrictive that they're like, first we send, I've seen some that are like, they read this web page, then they get this email, then they respond with this form, things like that, which are, um, I mean, that's a journey, all right, but it's not effective. Like
Sign me up for
prescriptive
that.
journeys
That
don't work, right? The thing that
yeah,
actually,
sign me up for that
right,
business
yeah,
model. That's gonna
everybody's
be so
excited.
easy to
Um,
predict.
yeah, in Who
Yeah,
First we
I
talk
think you
about,
make a good point.
yeah, in Who First we talk about
Where
a path to value rather than a journey, where the instead of dictating touch points, we think about what the uh, by working from actual customer interviews, voice of customer, do some data analysis and things like that. But like, what are the traps, which are the things that are stopping people from moving forward? And then you figure out how to service those, right? So if somebody's, um, we aren't using an example here yet, but if it's like, uh, if the product is, let's say, like a service that helps develop training processes and content for a business, right? Comes in and works with them to develop the content and the infrastructure for training. Um, a trap that might keep somebody from moving forward with a purchase decision like that would be, we think we need to have a good idea of what our content should be and how it should be organized and who should own it, even if we haven't written it yet, because we won't be able to get maximum value out of that product if we don't come prepared. That may be valid and it may not be, but it is definitely something that would stop somebody from engaging and moving forward, right? So, as an example, that kind of thing should belong on a path to value, because if you hear that all the time from prospective customers and from customers that you've helped, and they say, oh, we thought we couldn't get started without having all of our content together. Turns out we didn't, and we wasted all this time and effort, and we could have been so much easier. If you can remove that trap, you help people to their destination faster, right? Um, that's the kind of thing that belongs on a path to value, and that is actionable. It's based on your the intel that you gather from customers, and you don't need to try to shoehorn all of your existing like sales and marketing processes or content or interactions into that framework. It allows you to say like, oh, we know that there's 4 common traps that our different segments hit, and so all we need to do is make sure that we hit all of those, because an actual journey of a customer is more like pinball than bowling, right? You and the goal isn't to get them through every single point of a journey. It's to keep their decision, the ball in play, long enough to kind of knock down all of those traps and get them over the line to making a decision. Because if you don't keep the ball in play, then rolls to the bottom of the pinball play field and it's game over, right? Um, so
yep,
you got to support the way that people make these decisions. It's only an accident of human perception that we see time as linear, and so we think customer journeys are linear, but that's not how it works.
yeah. No, I think it's well said. I think almost always you can find some kind of internal motivation for the thing that's especially in customer journeys. Either it's just a representation that the sales process that we would like to execute.
Right.
Um, and I think that's where it's easy to get confused. We're not saying there should be no sales process and just focus on the buying like experience. Understand that they need to coexist in a way that each side is effectively like moving towards the close. Um, and but there's also the, we know it well, customer journey analytics, platforms. This is why I like almost I choose not to get good at that functionality, because then it allows me to say, I don't know enough, but have you figured this part out yet? Are you using this part of the data? Like, why are you even
Right.
trying to do this? Oh, to make marketing matter. Okay, now we're not even like in the ballpark that we need to be in now. Let's have a different conversation about why you need to make marketing matter,
Right.
right? And when you're creating all these touch points just so you can measure stuff, whenever there's an internal only reason for something that's trying to, support an external reason,
Right.
it's almost always coming from, the wrong place or less than place, right? And it creates a lot of, uh, it's almost always the heart of misalignment, either misalignment between your organization and the customer, or misalignment and other teams like in the organization. So,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like let me pull my diagram back up here real quick. Is that I was talking to an organization a couple of weeks ago, uh, and um, uh, they they're um, they're generating a lot of net new names. They're not acting on what they have, and therefore are kind of converting at a low rate. Um, but they didn't know what to do with kind of their first um, touch point. They're not essentially doing this whole process. I've lost my mouse cursor. There we go. Um, and they said like, well, we could do like, am I is my am I a good fit for this solution? And they made this offhand comment of like, and of course, like, we would make sure that anybody who takes the quiz, like, we have a good way to recommend that they're a good fit for the solution. And I said, let me stop you right there. If you want to generate trust, then anybody who is your assessment, quote unquote, in that scenario, recommends that they are a fit, then you had better be able to enumerate specifically why in their language. And you had better be able to tell people that are not a good fit that they are not, and or by how much and why, right? The point here is not that, oh, we've got to get in front of people because we want to convert as many quote unquote leads, good or bad, as we want. What we need to do is every one of these interactions, it's not a high bar for it to provide value to both parties. And when you come into it with that lack of alignment, like you described, that's where you get stuck with, oh, well, we're just using this to generate leads. And my good luck is kind of usually my response there.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, we got to
but like,
qualify.
yeah,
Okay.
it's so helpful to tell somebody, I understand the need that you're having, and I understand why you have come to me, but I don't think I can solve your problem the way that you're looking to have it solved, and here's why. One, two, three, four reasons, whatever. Um, because A, you spend less time with bad fit customers trying to get people over the line to buy who won't or shouldn't, or that if they do, they're going to churn and be really expensive, for you. And there's that. But I mean, the level of trust, right, that you can engender with everybody by approaching that correctly, right? Like the there will be false negatives in a scenario like that where you say like, yeah, we're looking for a fit score above 90 and you're in like 72. So we think probably aren't a good fit for you for these two reasons. We think we could help you for these two reasons if you are willing to like think about the problem this way or change this expectation or meet us in the middle, whatever. Some of those, if you get 10 people in that scenario who score somewhere in the middle, half of them are going to fall off and you're not going to get them, and maybe half of them are going to make it a little bit further in the funnel, and maybe you'll close one and they will be good enough, right? Like, but getting that data early and accumulating more data like that as you go is how you identify those potential fits that are kind of the middle of the road there, um, and how you evolve your processes as you go. The like just I'm going to skip to the end here for and we'll go back, but one of the things that is really valuable about doing this, this is an example where we used a simple um, HubSpot form that creates a custom object record and then gets associated with the contact, is one of the advantages of doing this versus just like a generic calculator or a form where you don't store the records discretely as a custom object in HubSpot is you can report on the outcomes of the custom object, right? So before earlier I said, you know, let's hypothesize a company that sells like consulting on training, content, and structure. This is a modeled training assessment that maybe it is. I'll go quickly here because it'll be helpful to see the questions before we look at the outcomes. But we can create reports on these custom objects that say, hey, our top of funnel people who are just like kicking around ideas and are not committing or not raising their hand, how are they describing their situations? And so we can do things like, which one do we want to look at here? Uh, let's talk about maybe coverage. So um, this is an assessment question that says, what percent of your critical processes are documented, right? And so we have 10 respondents. Uh, 30% of them said less than 25. Most of them said 25 to 50%, so still less than half of their critical processes. And um, and 20% of them said 50 to 75%, right? So you can get those outcomes to say like the people that we are getting in front of that we think we can serve and that they are trying to figure out if we can help them. What kind of situation are they in? And this helps inform, like if you were trying to think about what to do for top of funnel content, um, the you would definitely want to know, hey, who are we getting in front of? Are we getting in front of people that have a high degree of coverage, but are thinking about the transition from written content to video content for their training, or we get in front of people who are way earlier in their process and have realized they're reaching the breaking point of like, we don't have our critical processes documented, and we're trying to figure out what to do about that and how to tackle that problem. Um, that is like first party research intel that has provided value for them as you do the assessment and you give them the outcomes. And for you, for saying like, people who actively, or maybe in a B2B context, we often say problem aware, are describing their situation like this and we have the data to show it. Now we know how to focus our efforts, right? That's one of the reasons oh, reload my presentation here. You would, that's why you do this and how you get like non rush to a sales call value out of these interactions, right? It's beneficial to both of you. You help them figure out their problem, and uh, and you get insights out of it as well. So um, let's we've been going on that for much longer, but you asked, so let's try to speed through this. you referenced earlier, like when would we choose a custom object versus like a simple form for this kind of thing? And as I just enumerated over here, like one of the reasons would be if you want to report on this results separately from a conversion, right? That's one of the reasons. But you have a couple of options when you are building information like this, or collecting information like this in your CRM about your prospects. If you have like a simple interaction where you're just asking one question, and you can be using it to build a profile and tailor future content, interactions, all of that. But if it's like a one question simple thing, it's fine to collect that stuff like on a contact or on a company record. um, where what we're talking about today is when you have a little bit more sophisticated need, or interaction than that, where you use custom objects when there's some kind of like calculation or determination that is made based on those responses rather than simple, record and track. If you have an interaction where you see a lot of tire kicking, then getting in front of them with something like this um, keeps that tire kicking out of uh, your lead creation motion, so that your uh, BDRs and SDRs aren't calling people who are like, oh, I was just wondering, like maybe maybe in a year I'll do this, but like I was just like, what's
Just
your price
curious.
range, right? Like that's the kind of thing that you want to do a um, price range, especially like give them a configurator. uh, don't don't waste 45 minutes of a BDR time on somebody who's like, I just want to figure out your price range, right? There's a lot more complexity. You can plug that into your motion, but that kind of thing. If you see people doing these interactions more than once, or you expect them to do it more than once, like to see if they are like running what if scenarios, or if you expect them to try it over time, like they're going to try, they're going to try this today, they're going to try tomorrow, they're going to try next week. Custom objects rather than gunking up your existing properties. If you want to use that reporting to improve the results over time, right, with score properties, especially, if you want to give a fit score and then look at whether your outcomes, 6 months or 12 months down the line, the outcomes that your customers achieve, if the fit score aligns, you need to iterate on that fit score, the questions, or the methodology, and making it fun, right? That's another reason um, that you would do this. Uh, Questions on that?
That's a pretty clear breakdown there.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So the we talked about let me go back to this. Uh, for those assessments, right? We can do these things a lot of ways. We'll talk about some of the details here, but um, you can set these things up real quick, like a HubSpot form that, with the questions, creates a record of the custom object and associates it with the contact. We'll look at some ways to like visualize that in a second. But we can also choose, if you have a fancy third-party app where you do this and then integrates and create the contact record, or something kind of in between that, like a Jotform or a Typeform or some other form builder experience that gives you more flexibility in terms of presentation or question types, or that has like form handling and scoring capabilities outside of HubSpot. We can talk a little bit more about that later. The details aren't super important, but then we can use an interconnect to create the custom object. The the decision there, right, is do you want to use a HubSpot native form where you just have these simple drop-down questions, or do you want to use an external tool? Like I said, get started with something simple. Make your assessment a HubSpot form with some drop-downs. But if you just have minimal calculations, basic question types, um, do it right in HubSpot with a native form to try it out as a pilot program. The caveat being the kind of work in progress new form builder as of our recording this has not been updated to have to be able to place custom object properties in the form yet. So you need to use the legacy, which is also the feature complete form builder at this time. But you can, I've done some fancy assessments like this using external tools like Jotform, for example, where you have particularly complex scoring is one of those where you might need to involve external systems. I had an assessment that scored a company's like sophistication using, I believe it was 12 across 12 categories, each of which had multiple questions with weighted responses that generated, an assessment score across those 12 categories and then a master score, something like that. You can do in HubSpot if you want to get into some real fancy footwork. If a marketer or sales enablement person is building that, something like Jotform to Google Sheets to custom object via Zapier is often much more achievable. But you have a lot of flexibility from simple to beautiful and complicated when you're doing this. The other thing to consider when you're doing this is, or another thing, is whether you want to store just the results or the outcomes, or whether you're trying to store everything on the custom object. The um, the when I'm working with people who are doing this for the first time, the assumption would be like, oh well, let's score everything so that we can go back and look at it later, and that is uh, not a bad. Um, it's not a bad instinct, uh, but you know, I've worked with people whose first assessments like this that we're working on are like a 5 question, and I've worked with people whose first assessments, start out as a 5 question and end up as a 25 question, and then typically shortly after, somehow we managed to whittle it back down to 5, which seemed impossible pre-launch. Um, and so, but there are some like that 12 category assessment had, I believe, 7 questions in each category, each with between 3 and 5 responses. It was a very sophisticated assessment, delivered a fairly the overview report. Even the overview was fairly detailed, and then had like a follow up, um, or was attempted. The follow up action was to book a review session, right, to talk about how to action that report. Um, the uh, the you know 5 questions or 7 questions per 12 categories. That's a lot of data. We did that one outside of HubSpot, and we only took the scores, like in this right hand column, into HubSpot and retained the full detail externally so that we go back and get it if we need it, which nobody ever went back and looked at it, because I helped them design it so that the scores were load bearing and brought all the information into HubSpot that was needed. So that custom object just had the 12 category scores and then the master score. You do that if the individual questions aren't as important, or they change as you iterate. Like seasonality can be an important consideration there, or you're doing sophisticated calculations, or you need to bring those. You're bringing some form of interaction with an external system, like an LMS or something like that. But
Yeah.
uh,
And
if you're doing it in HubSpot, you are going to store, if it's the simple 5 question, the way to do it is just to store all of those records on the custom object, which works just fine. You know, um, especially if you're like our
Yeah.
example form we'll look at here in a second. But the questions, what percentage, this is not legible on screen for you, but what percentage of your critical and frequent processes are documented? That is a question where we can really, we can ask questions where the conclusions or the outcomes correlate really strongly with the answer, right? That's easy to answer as a drop down. That's not one where you have to run sort of something sophisticated in the background to sort it out. Did
Yeah.
you
And I
want
just
to
feel
interrupt me?
compelled to remind folks, make sure you're going to do something with the data. Like, it's so easy um, to ask a lot of questions and then get a lot of answers. And then either you don't do anything with it, or uh, like Josh was alluding to, we'll get back to it. We'll take a look at those scores at some point because it's going to be hard work to tabulate what all this data means and how are we parsing through. And often that gets in the way of a question that really should be qualitative, and we're making it quantitative just because it's easier to manage. But now the quantitative score really doesn't mean anything.
Yep,
So really, always think through. Somebody fills this out. This happens, then this happens, then this happens.
yep,
And if at any point it's hard to maintain, that's when you start thinking of different ways. Like, it doesn't change the fact that you need the information, and too often it does, right? Where it's like, no, you still need the information. Oh, we'll just let them call the sales. No, no, we can't keep falling back to that. We got to do the work to figure
yep,
this out because oftentimes, especially in HubSpot, there is a way to do it, and you just have to
yep.
figure out what the best, most effective way is to do it for your organization.
Yeah, yeah, and well, our shared experience has led to you hitting the nail on the head for something we're going to come back to again more in this conversation. But here's a preview of a form where we've done this, right? Like this one is asks for the email up front. We'll talk about some other options for doing that, and it's just this is again our hypothesized like training consulting, right? Like we just ask these questions: what percentage of your critical and frequent processes are documented? What is the primary format your documentation is in? Do you regularly validate employees' learning and retention? Not really. And how often do you review and revise documentation to ensure it's up to date when we notice a problem? Right. If you if you are, I'm a marketer, right? So so this person really, if I'm the marketer for this hypothesized company, this person really needs our help, right? Um, and if I had somebody come in to the system um, and as um, somebody who's inquired, right? They've raised their hand. They say like, I really, I'm serious about solving this. I really want to talk to somebody about like, what does this look like? Um, these are the kinds of questions that an SDR would ask that person on the phone, right? They're the kinds of questions that would help us figure out where they are, not on their bogus customer journey, but on their journey to like, I'm in this place of pain and I have a vision of the future that I'm trying to achieve. And we're trying to figure out like, okay, where are you at? How far away is that? How bad is that problem? Right. And there's a lot of other contexts that we would want to ask in that BDR conversation. But if somebody fills this out, we know the kinds of things that we would want to put in front of them from a like content from a next action perspective. We could use this to diagnose some basic recommendations on like where should you be focusing your time right now. Like they only have 25% of their critical and frequent processes documented. So are we surprised they don't regularly validate their employees' learning and attention? No, because how would they, right? But if we think like, okay, 100 people representing different businesses filled this out, what would we want to say to the people who are in the group that respond like this? Like, well, we would probably want to say things like, um, uh, look, you don't need to worry about, as I said before, you don't need to fall into the trap of we need to have all our processes figured out before we get somebody to help us, because maybe something that we specialize in is helping unblock that for people, right? But we may say, here's some ways to get you unblocked in the process of thinking about that other 75% that is undocumented. Do we need to like create all of those and assign them to internal stakeholders to see who has to develop what? No, but you know, maybe like a self-directed 30-minute workshop, video and instruction sheet downloadable would be something that would provide value to them, that we get in front of these folks and say like, look, if you're feeling blocked here, try this out, right? And we're ready when they come into the sales process to take their experience and the deliverable from that and leverage it to get them value, right? that is that's what
Yeah.
this can look like. It can just be this simple, and it's the ways, we could spend another 2 hours just shooting from the hip here on ways that, depending on the configuration of these responses, we could provide real value to these folks that makes it worth, um, submitting to our questioning, right?
Yeah. And that's the difference between it, like external value versus internal value. And when you come at it from the perspective of I need a lead for my BDR to follow up on, it does not align with where they're at in their process. Because if they're filling out a form like this, they're doing research
Right.
and they want to understand something about something that they're experiencing. And they will tell you a lot if you give them an opportunity to do it at their own time and on their own, at their own, and also in that moment, right? Like if they're feeling it right then, and you make
Right.
them schedule a call, right? It's gone by then, right? So
Right.
uh, you can get some really like super real data and real understanding, while also just sometimes they just want somebody to listen, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And if you
And
can be
like,
there for them.
yeah, to both like recognize like, oh, somebody understands the challenge that I'm having and is understands it so well that they have specialized in helping me figure it out, right? Like that is very validating, and that really, like like I said, you know, this is the equivalent of a business walking up to somebody and say like, I can tell that you're struggling with your like documentation and training. um, have you thought about X? Not in like a cold email, but it's like, it's a very human thing that feels like, oh, you know, you are empathetic and you're an expert. I would love to talk to you. Tell me more about that, right? We'll go back to a couple
Yes.
of other things real quick, but like you mentioned, like the things not to do just because somebody, I would say I have mixed success at this, right? Like if you get 10 responses to something like this, um, particularly if the leader under which an effort like this is being, um, piloted, comes from a sales background, uh, it's really hard when you start to see success and adoption of these engagements or these interactions, to you have to have like, soccer cleats, shin guards, and two baseball bats to keep them from being like, well, let's just email all of them and try to book a meeting, right? Um, and that's a case. Winning that battle is a case by case basis. It isn't to say that we don't have follow up interactions or opportunities to let those people opt into conversations. But the point is that we should, if we are doing this well, if we understand who our customers are and we really are, we have shared interests, every one of those interactions should deliver equivalent value to both parties, right? The reporting and the data analysis that it gives us is a valuable enough reason for most businesses to do something like this. Um, and then we look to capitalize on that data and the value exchange in other ways. And that's a conversation for another day. But like we don't use these as a hard sell because we're trying to support the way that people research and make these decisions. But most importantly is we don't want to do nothing either for that person or with that data, right? But the whole um, strategy here that should guide this is we aren't thinking about like, oh, let's create a form so we can get some names, generate some leads, or prime the funnel for next quarter or whatever. Like we're coming at it from like, what does our audience need when they're making these decisions? How can we provide value? What can we ask them or do for them that would help us serve them better? And then figure out how you can deliver results that pair your unique value, your perspective with those needs. And then you go figure out your implementation details right from there. Like some of those, these are outcomes from the um, prospect side. We'll look at a specific application of an outcome from, we've already looked at the reports, but we'll look at another one from the business side in a second. But, we've all done um, some form had some kind of engagement where we did this, right? Like um, where we provide some responses uh, uh, and get some hopefully value from the company in exchange for doing it. But we often think about these as like, oh, we'll answer these questions, or maybe I shouldn't say this is how we think about it. I think the path of least resistance is often like, oh, we'll ask some questions, and then we have that 3-page PDF that we made, or we have, you know, a white paper, or we have like a whatever, and we'll just give it that to them as a downloadable from a, I said, figure out the value first and then go to implementation details. Uh, don't go on the path of least resistance of like, oh, well, it's just what we'll do is we'll keep everything we do the same. We'll put a different form in front of it, right? Like that's not exchanging value, right? Um, but if you collect this level of information, if you're doing this right, um, you can like this one here. Like if you have a um, gated downloadable and you want to give them the um, an assessment or a score or some feedback based on their results, and not gate that with an email, but then say like, hey, here's a more detailed version of that, or here's a version of that that is specific to your outcomes, whether that's just like a category, you put them in your category A, and here's our category A report, or you want to do a full on, you know, AI generated within constraints of their results, fancy thing. You can gate just that behind um, an email form, and that gives you the way for somebody to raise their hand and say like, actually, that was a cool assessment. Yeah, that makes sense. My outcome was I'm a turtle. Um, and you know what? I'll download the turtle PDF. Like I think that's interesting enough, right? Um, is a way to like to recognize the people who are engaging deeper and actually trending towards it making sense to enter their funnel. But there are so many things that you can do um, to give uh, to give value to your prospects who engage with any of these interactions, right? Even the basic, um, I'm trying to look. I may not have actually included it. Well, there's this one. If you're doing a configurator, right, and they choose all of their options, you don't just want to give them a price or like a pick list or something from that. They are doing research, so you want to be able to say, you answered our questions. They were qualitative. We kind of gave you a quantitative result, but now let's go a level deeper, and we're going to take you to content or to an experience that explains why, explains what these things are, and connects them uh, to connects each of those like points in the outcome to the input that you gave us, right? That really demonstrates and reinforces your expertise and shows that you understand them and that you are not just trying to, you know, get them into a configuration that you can then sell them, right? Um, so we've been going for a while. Let's talk really quick about what like a utilization or a value side in addition to, you know, we can get our reports that show us what our meaningful, this audience that we believe is meaningful, what they are, how they are describing their situation and their problem. It can help us tailor our marketing, can help us tailor our messaging. It can help us figure out, look for new pain points, how to reach out, all of that stuff. We also have, what we have here is 10. This is, as I always say, synthetic data. I don't put customer data out there in front of the internet. But here are 10, the 10 assessments that we were using in that reporting. Let's go into Sam Smith. So just at the very basic level of like on a contact or a deal, for example, if Sam went on to say, yeah, give me the turtle PDF, that sounds like me, and this is the problem that I'm trying to solve. When the SDR pulls up Sam's record or a deal that had been generated for Sam, in this case, this is just the contact, but we can just throw a center column card on the contact record that has the last assessment object that Sam submitted and all of their outcomes, right? So whether you're working this in the context of a lead or you're working this in engaging with the contact or the context of a deal, you can see like, okay, Sam took the training assessment, low coverage, they don't review any of their content, it's all written, so they're probably having some adoption challenges. And then these two are, our form is tailored to customer language, but we have, let's do, we validate and have ongoing assessments. Our question has some, just demonstrating some additional things here.
Some
But
conditional logic.
Right, conditional logic to get drilled down. But Sam told us that they do a basic assessment, which is validated at the time of training in this form, and that their approach to the assessment is just a basic quiz. They don't do any ongoing practical demonstration or observation of the knowledge in action, right? So from that first interaction, or whether it's phone, email, um, when Sam does come down and enter the funnel, your your first and anybody else who interacts with Sam has some context of like, here's where Sam was starting, and if Sam submitted this a bunch of times, we can also see all of Sam's assessments here, right? Um, like if Sam did it this 2 quarters ago, and then 1 quarter ago, and then twice this month, as they are trying to make sense of things, right? We can see it over time. But if are, we get the value here of our first conversation with Sam is not, so tell me where you're at. What brings you to our like training, consulting? It's like, okay, you know, like
It's
they
like,
are
you
really
son of a
struggling,
gun. I've done
right?
like 8 assessments already. I know
Right,
you have all this information in your system.
right. Yeah. And so like, or if you have nothing like that, right? Like a company that isn't doing anything like that, they're coming in and the first 7 minutes, instead of they're grilling Sam instead of coming in and being ready to deliver value even in that conversation, right? Like, in very least, you can say like, "Oh, I saw that you took our assessment, you downloaded our turtle report. It looks like you're kind of like just getting started and maybe trying to figure out, right, like how to do this for your organization, tell me a little bit more about that, right, rather than starting all the way from zero. Right? Um, so that is the examples like that are how you can, demonstrate in um, in these contexts, why you do it if you aren't going to try to turn every single person who submits one of these into a lead, just to lose them because they're so far, you away from making a decision um, in their journey. Being able to surface, if you pick these questions right, delivers value for them, and it gives you, you know, extremely valuable context for beginning these conversations. So
Yeah.
the let's go back here. So here's the takeaway. Here's what you should do. Uh, think about what your audience needs as they are researching and embarking on this quest. Figure
Please.
out how you can provide value before you're even like in a sales context. What questions would you ask that could help you serve them better? Figure out how you can deliver results for them, pair your unique value with their needs, and then, you know, it's all implementation details from there.
Man, we could spend another session on that slide alone. Um,
For sure.
yeah. What keeps coming to mind is like this alignment that we keep talking about. Um, whatever you want to call it, journey, process. This this alignment that has to happen between buyer and seller. Like, because sometimes the internal teams do a ton of work to provide a ton of value. And then when you try to fit it in your process because it needs to go through these stages and like some of the worst experiences I've had where I get a really good, I get value, and then a BDR, SDR calls me up and doesn't start from ground zero, but he starts from irrelevance, saying, "Oh, I saw you downloaded an asset."
Right.
Like, "Oh, did you?" Like, okay, I know exactly how this call is going to go now,
Yep.
and I don't
Yep.
want to be on it, right?
Yeah.
Like, um, you don't have the information you need that I've taken the time to give, and I should be talking to somebody who's ready to help me buy right now, right? And now I
Yeah.
know that your process is going to make me go through four different calls and we're just not doing it. And it's like, sorry, these are the buyer expectations now.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not, we keep telling you like Amazon, all the different experiences out there have created this experience. Yeah, if you choose not to do it, um, it will be detrimental, to your business in some way. And the key, like the tools are there to help you do it, right? It's not, it's not as hard as you think. Like Josh said, I mean, you can set this stuff up in 30 minutes. The key is deciding to do it,
Yeah.
because all the questions you already know, they're already happening inside your processes. Um, you just gotta kind of let go of some control of the process, and when you do, people return the value, in kind. So
Yeah.
this was awesome, man.
Yeah.
We'll keep we'll keep on the journey next time, but as we provide these tools, obviously doesn't matter if you have the tools if you're not thinking about your own processes and what's happening for your business. So as you think about different points of the journey, um, internal or external, where there's just friction and you're not sure why, like take a look. Maybe we can ask questions in different ways. Maybe we can do it asynchronously instead of requiring it on a call. Lots of different ways to think about it, but think about it. Find those opportunities and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye bye.